Welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast, where we share the real stories of workplace transformation. And now, here are your hosts, Will Stewart and Chris Patton.
Welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast. So glad to have each and every one of you listening and watching along on Facebook. I'm joined as always with the CEO of His Way at Work, Chris Patton. Hey, Chris.
Will, how you doing?
Doing great.
Man, we are excited today. We've got Carine Ruder coming in from Colorado. She is co-owner with her husband of a business called L&R Pallet. And I've personally been to visit their business. I've seen the results of the work that she and her husband do, her husband James. And I'm just excited to dig into really some of the strength behind what she brings to that business and how much of an impact she's having there. So should be a very good episode today.
Yeah, absolutely will.
So, welcome, Carine. Good to have you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So, let's hear the story. Like, how did the L&R Pallet get started? We heard a little bit from James, but, I'd love to hear your perspective on just kind of how you got involved with the business and everything leading up to now.
So James's parents started the business in 1974. They borrowed $500 on a credit card, and his dad was working for Coca-Cola, decided to start the business, and they took the loan out on the credit card. So his dad would work at Coca-Cola during the day, repair the pallets at night, and then James's mom would deliver the pallets on a little flatbed truck with her boys in tow. And then after making her deliveries and her pickups, then she would go back and do all the bookwork and the paperwork and the admin side of the business.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And so it obviously grew, and James started getting involved with it. When did you come along? When did you come on the scene?
So James kind of grew up in it. Every spring break, every Christmas, every summer break, he was always there working. Didn't think that's what he wanted to do for a living. And then after we were married and he graduated from college, kind of saw that maybe that was a good path to explore. And when we were married, I finished college, and then we both started working for the company thereafter.
Yeah. And what was sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. He kind of did the operations side, and then I did the admin side along with his mom. So he kind of took over the side that his dad was doing. And then I began to learn through his mom the admin side. And with my sister-in-law, the three of us ladies.
And what's that like having a business with a spouse? Because that the work goes with you.
It's not just a spouse; it's a spouse and a mother-in-law and a sister-in-law.
That's true.
Wow.
Think about that. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I always like to say there was maybe too many chefs in the kitchen. There was a lot of, transitional sort of growing pains. The business was growing a lot. So we had some hard times, but, through it all, we always kept God as the center of it. And we're doing good now. So, but there were some hard staff management meetings.
I'm sure.
I bet.
And difficult Thanksgiving gatherings and Christmas gatherings and.
No, we kept that pretty, we never had that. Had one Thanksgiving that was going to be maybe a little bit tense, but it was the last Thanksgiving before my oldest son was headed to college. And James and his dad were kind of, it was actually when we were kind of transitioning the business from their name and into his. And, that was a big letting go process for James's parents and for his dad. And, there was some tension there, and I just called it out like 2 days before Thanksgiving. And I said, this is the last Thanksgiving my son is going to be home, and we need to work this out. And so we had a meeting, and it settled down, and we had a great holiday together. So
that's huge. That's a great legacy to have, to be able to separate that out.
So were there any hard and fast rules? Let's just talk about this, delve into the whole like family dynamic thing. Were there any hard and fast rules that you guys had of like, okay, we're going to keep the work at work and doesn't come home? I know Chris comes from a family of, business. I don't. Like what's that dynamic like, and how do you navigate all that?
I don't think there were any like set ground rules when we came into it. We've always talked about it, and we still do. Even James and I, it's so integrated into who we are and what we do that there is no separation. And I don't think we've ever felt like we needed that. It was so overpowering that we needed to not have it be a non-topic. It's just always been a topic, and we're all okay with that. We're fine with it. Now we have kids that are actually kind of possibly transitioning. Our kids have been going to work with me since they were 3 weeks old. So they've grown up in it, and they know it's a part of what we do, and the blessings that come from it, and the hardness that comes, the difficult times that come with it.
Yeah. That's good.
So we've chatted with Matthew Freisler, who is about legacy. So he's third generation coming in, picking up his dad's business at Polydeck. What are you guys doing when it comes to just legacy and figuring out how like the next generation, comes in? Is it more just apprenticeship, just learn the business, and like kind of what are the steps you guys are taking with that?
We don't really know what's going to happen yet. Like I said, the kids started coming to work with me when they were 3 weeks old. I would get one child into preschool at 4, and then I would bring the next baby to work, and I'd get that baby into preschool at 4, and then I'd bring the next baby to work. And so there's no separation. They've always been involved to this day. They've all done spreadsheets for us. They've done Excel sheet, invoicing, stuffing envelopes at night, helping sign checks, getting the mail dropped off. Our oldest son is in Los Angeles. He's married, and I don't know that it's not that he has a disinterest in the business. His heart and his passion is just another direction. And then our son, who is 19, would be a student at CSU. He would be a sophomore this year. Because of the online learning, has decided to just take the year off, and is now working at the company. And he seems to be doing well with it. He kind of, I think, is still marinating on it, praying about it, not sure where he's supposed to be. And we're trying to give him the freedom to figure that out. We would love if the kids, one of or both or all, came to the company. I hope that our transition from our prior experience of transitioning to us will be smoother when we transition to them. But it was fine when we did it. So we'll navigate it. We'll figure it out. God's in the center of it. So it'll work out if it's meant to be.
That's good.
So the business started by your in-laws. You guys take over. You're growing it. Obviously, we talk to a lot of business owners and CEOs, people who are in leadership, who have a heart for making a difference to their employees and in their employees' lives. So tell me a little bit about that story where you started from, just kind of doing business nominally. Probably there were some things you were doing, and then just how God worked in your lives to get you to a place to where you are today, and just working on that caring culture.
So James's parents founded the company on Christ. So it's always been a Christ-centered business. Yeah. I would say, and it's always run that way. But when we sort of had our transformation, it just took that Christian level to just a deeper level. And that started in, let's see, James and I were just discussing it this morning. He's really good about dates, and I'm not so good about dates. So in 2012, I took a missions trip with my boys to Peru. And during that missions trip, I just fell in love with it down there. And I remember calling him one night from the hotel bathroom and just pouring my heart out and telling him, you need to come down here. You need to see this. It's just so amazing. I think prior to that, we always felt like missions work was for somebody else. And if you have the financial means to help, you send your finances, but there was never any go and serve for us. Not that we were opposed to it. We just didn't think that was who we were or what we were called to do. And so coming home from that trip, I was just on fire. My boys were on fire for what we had felt down there. And James reluctantly, after me nagging on him for months, went down there with our family again. We left our daughter at home because we just weren't quite comfortable with her going down there yet. And so us and the two boys then returned back to Peru, and that's kind of the beginning of the transformation for us.
So how old were the boys then, Carine?
So my oldest son was a freshman. He attends Valor Christian High School, and they do a lot of what they call discovery trips. And so he's my sort of explorer, wants to be out in the world, wants to see the world, and he wanted to start taking the discovery trips with his high school. And because we hadn't really done any trips like that, I felt like, okay, you can do one of those, but first you're going to go with us, or one of us. And so that was why I went, he went with our church, and then my younger son. So he would have been a freshman, so 14. And then my younger son would have been 11. And then Emma did not go with us that first time. So, but after that, when we did start taking her passion was unreal. She was so dialed in and just loves to be there, loves to be with the kids. Anytime, in fact, now with COVID and not being able to go, every couple of months, can we go? Can we go? Can we go? Can we go down there yet? Is it time to go down there? Will they let us come? So, yeah, she's really passionate about it now.
So specifically, excuse me, for you, what happened in Peru? What is it about that experience that woke something up in you or lit you up so much?
I think it was just seeing, I feel like in America, we're just so incredibly blessed. And we have so many resources to reach out to when we have a struggle or we have a need. And they don't have that. And so all they have is God. And they don't have healthcare. They don't have, clinics and doctors and endless things, chiropractors and, social programs that can help them. So when they're struggling, that's all they have is God. And there was just sort of an awakening to that like, it was just a change in me that like, wow, we could really make a difference here, and just a passion for it.
So how did that translate coming back home? You mentioned that was kind of a spark for what's happened since back home with the business. Describe that logical move from this epiphany in Peru to what you're doing with L&R Pallet.
So we had made multiple trips down there. It began to be where James would go on his own sometimes because our kids still had to go to school and I still had to be the mom to the kids. Somebody had to be a present parent. So I didn't go quite as frequently as he did. He describes it as kind of his well. It's where he fills himself back up. It's where he feels Christ and he feels his reservoir is filled again. So we would go multiple times as a family during the year, and then he would sometimes go by himself. And on one of our trips, after going for probably 2 years, we were kind of at the end of our day. We had spent the day with several orphanages and children and taking them out, doing, feeding them, giving them gifts, doing experiences with them. And then we were back at the hotel that night. And I remember just kind of having like a download with James. And we felt like we were making really good traction with the groups of people that we were working with while we were there. But then when we would come home, that traction would sort of diminish. And then it would pick up again when we would go back down there, and then it would diminish. And so we kind of had a group of kids that we were sort of closer to than the whole group. And I remember that night after we were out with those kids all day, we were downloading, and I remember just saying to James, it's so easy to do missions work when you're in a foreign country, when you're not, in your environment. It's easy because the need is so great, and there's so much that they need physically, spiritually, emotionally. There's so much of it, and they're not afraid to share. They're willing to tell you what they need. They're an open to what they need. And I remember saying to James, it's so easy when you're in a foreign country, but how do you do this in the U.S.? Because I feel like whenever you think about someone in missions in the U.S., what comes to mind? Somebody screaming on the corner, holding a sign, you're going to hell if you don't accept Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is your savior. That's what you think of when you think of American missions work. And so I feel like that night was God saying, oh no, let me show you how it can be done in the U.S. And so the passion that we felt for the people in Peru then just started to sort of transition over into the company and the people that were really in our world and right in front of us, doing life with us.
At that time, if you can remember, not an exact number, but roughly how many employees would you say you guys had at that time?
It's so that when James's parents, when we took over the company, when we began to work in the company with his parents, there was probably about 10 employees. And then I would say our kind of steady number over the last few years has been about 120 to 130.
Wow.
And that, I'm sure James told you, but, we struggled to keep employees for years. It's a manufacturing company. It's very, very hard work. It's dirty, it's noisy, it's cold, it's hot. You're in the elements every day. It's very fast paced. We had a turnover of almost 300% a year. And so, we were just flipping people through the company constantly. And that's very, very costly. Time-wise, it's costly, on the finances. And we had tried every single demographic of people that you can think of when we were, trying to resolve that 300% turnover. And then we had this group of refugees that were from Burma come in through an agency, and we started hiring them, and they were sort of part of our transition from, into the more faith-based company.
Wow. So how long ago was that?
Oh, I told you I'm not the date person, James.
I'm going to stop asking you dates, Carine. I'm sorry. But it's been a handful of years or more, right?
I don't know, So I would say, what did he tell me this morning? I had to call him because I was like, I don't remember the exact days. I think it was 2 years after we had done that first missions trip is when he began to hire the refugees through the agency.
So I'm going to take 2 or 3 data points and just kind of build a bridge here. But it started with James for the most part, and even you to a degree until you went to Peru, somewhat of a mindset of our job as business owners in regards to missions is to make money and give it. And then you went to Peru and it shifted to, no, we can actually get involved and go somewhere and do missions. He joined you in your leadership in that. And you guys as a family started doing missions in addition to the business and making money to give. You're also going and getting involved. But then it transitioned back home to where through that experience, God showed you guys, you can also do it right here at home in the business with not just in the community, but within the employee base of the business and impact the community that way. Is that a fair progression?
Yes, it is. And we had gone through several years before that missions trip, we had gone through some embezzlement. The company, we had several employees that were stealing from us, and it got pretty rough for for a year. And James was just at a really, really low point, felt like a failure. We had fired almost all of our management team. We were basically running the company by ourselves. So he had just kind of come to like the bottom and the end of himself. And so I think the timing of that missions trip and all that we had experienced through that was his way out. And I think his surrenderance to God and to let God then be in control and him, I feel like men, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I feel like as a woman, you sort of have that surrenderance because you're just used to that, a bit of, more of that submission to Christ. And I feel like for James, he felt like he had to fix it. He had to be the one to get us out of this hole. Through that whole experience, I just knew that God was going to take care of us. It may not be fun. It may not be good. We may have to make some life changes, but we were going to be okay. And I don't know that he was feeling that. I think he thought we were going to lose the business. We were going to lose our homes. We were going to have to pull the kids from their schools. And so our approach to it was so much different. But that experience and what we had in Peru was sort of his way out of that and his surrender to just fully let God be in charge of all that was going on and all that needed to happen. But
That's
yes,
powerful.
your line is exactly how, I would describe it.
So I want to put a pin in that for a moment, dig into something you just said and kind of go a little deeper with that. So let's reframe. We are talking to business leaders, Christian business owners and leaders on this podcast, many of which either have or will be going through, may even be currently based on COVID situations, right? Going through a crisis that could draw some similarities and parallels to your embezzlement situation. And so you've got your husband who is the typical guy thinking, I got to fix this. Everybody's relying on me to do it.
Just work harder.
Right? Just work harder and I'm missing something.
Work harder.
Exactly. So that mindset is going on. You had the trust, you had the faith that God would get you through it. You knew you weren't living in a fantasy land. You knew there may be some changes, things that would be more difficult. But here's the question. Upon what were you relying on, or where did you find and draw this strength from? It wasn't out of the blue. I know enough about you to know it wasn't just some random thought and you just locked in on it. There's something you were digging into, something that was giving you that strength of faith. One, what was that? And two, how would you advise somebody else to tap into that?
I don't know. I didn't grow up Christian. I came to know the Lord when I met James through our premarital counseling. Basically, James told me, if you love me, you have to love Jesus. And so I did love him and did come to know Jesus. I don't know if that has something to do with it. I guess I kind of have had two lives. I know my life without Christ and I know my life with Christ. I would never go back to the life without him. And so I don't know if that has something to do with it. If I just had sort of a childlike faith, I guess I just approach things with the confidence that he says he'll take care of it, and he will. I've seen his hand in our lives, and his parents built the company that way. Hearing the stories from them about, they just had all sorts of little stories that they would share with us when there was a big bill that was coming and they didn't know how they were going to pay for it. It would come together and it would work out. And when they needed the money to start it, they took the loan out on their credit card, or they needed to have the pallets to repair, to get them back out the door to sell. There was just so many times that he had already provided for us that I just went into it knowing that, if he was going to do that, why would he not do it now?
Well, James attributes in other conversations much of the strength during that time to you and to your strength. So I know there are others that are going through similar experiences and can draw from that. And I think what I'm hearing you say, one is you didn't have any preconceived notions from a childhood in the church. So what you were learning was coming as an adult, a young adult, but an adult. And you took historical fact, what had happened in that family over years, what his parents had told you and shared, and you rested on previous experience and the faith that you were growing in at the time. Is that fair to say?
Right. And I do think there is sort of a difference of how men approach things and women approach things. So I think I just took and held to that truth, and our kids were in the middle of that. They knew what was going on. They knew the struggles, the dinner conversations, the tears, the stress. So they saw how we approached it, and they knew, we don't hide anything from them, as James's parents didn't either. And so I think that's been why our experience has been okay relational wise as we've gone through, the years together. That's
good. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know I can see it in your face, but I know that was a tough time. And
yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
No, you go right ahead.
And I feel like I am such a strong believer in that there is just a constant battle. And we as Christians, I feel like sometimes sort of submit to the struggle that we're being presented with. And we just surrender and let it sort of happen. And I think there is a constant spiritual battle going on around us. And we have to toughen up and fight back and push Satan back and speak against the things that are coming at us. And so when I say that is my gift, and James says that is the strength of that strength comes from me and the company, that is true. I am a fighter and I will not let Satan win. I will stay up at night and yell and scream at him at the house and in the business to help things go the way that God would have them go, or that we would like them to go. And that experience was no different. COVID was no experience, that is no different. Situations with our children, with our marriage, with our health, that is how I approach everything.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We're going to come back to the COVID situation here in a few minutes. Yeah. But I want to go back. We put a pin in the progression from pay for missions, go do missions, to let's do missions where we are, in the business, in the community. Tell us a little bit about when that started happening. What were some of the impacts? What were some of the experiences you saw in the business with employees, and what you guys started doing there? Because I know for a fact you're having huge impact on that, not just the refugee community, but the community at large and the people specifically working for your company. Give us kind of your perspective on how that came about from the shifting from the Peru missions to there at L&R Pallet. But second, what are some ways, because you guys are in a little bit of a unique situation. Like you said, it's a manufacturing company. It's a hard job. I mean, just the work is hard, right? Conditions are tough. The work is hard. You've got, at the time, you had a refugee community that other business owners may not have. But just from your perspective, what were some of the things that you were thinking through and helping James think through, doing it together to figure out how you could do missions at L&R Pallet right where you were?
So I think one of the things was that the group of people, you made a point, you said something there a second ago where you said we had refugees available to us. And we have people say that to us all the time. We hold conferences and lunch and learns and have people come and try to learn how to do this in their company. And oftentimes people will say to us, oh, but I don't have refugees. And so James and I always like to stop people in that. And it does not matter if you have refugees. God places people around you, and those people are the people that you're supposed to touch. So this isn't about refugees. This is about you reaching people that are in the world, in the world that God has put you in. And if we were all just being refugees, then who would serve the others? So, we always like to sort of back that one up and tell people it can be if you're an employer of one or two people, if you're an employer of 500, if you're just, if you're an employee, if you're at the grocery store, you can serve whoever is around you. It's just that heart and that desire. So I think at L&R Pallet, one of the first steps that James took was hiring a pastor to come in. He joined a business Christian group. He started going to that I think it's monthly that meeting is held. And then we started to bring in pastors. And that was sort of our first step of missions in the workplace.
So how did that, so I'm going to go back to the refugees, because I love how you responded to that. And thank you for clarifying that, right?
I'm not correcting you.
Oh, hey, I take it that way. But that's part of my point, is that you're in a little unique situation, but in reality, we all have unique situations where God can use exactly who we are, where we are. So how did you guys didn't suddenly get a flyer in the mail that says, here are the Burmese refugees, and this is how we can start ministering to them? You had to go through a period of figuring that out. So initially, you've already said we had a problem, turnover. It was a huge problem, and we knew we had to fix that. We tried other demographics. So how did you find this path for a period that was the refugees, and how would that maybe translate into other business owners looking for the same type of opportunity?
Well, the ironic thing in that is we had tried refugee services before. We had tried placement agencies before, and it never went well. The language barrier was tough. I honestly think the key factor to this going different than how it had in the past was that God was present and he was in the center of it. I think the first group of refugees that we hired were 7 of them. And at one time we had, as that began to grow, I think we were up to like 85 of our 130 employees. And so we had 17 different languages within our company at one time. The road was not easy. It wasn't like we hired them and instantly all of the issues went away. It was kind of 1 step forward, 2 steps back with everything. And so it was just the desire and God's presence and showing us how to make it work and what we needed to do. And so we hired the pastors they would come in, I think weekly and meet with the employees, make themselves available to the employees. That's a financial commitment that you make. So that began to be sort of the beginning of the resources that we could offer to them. And then we just started presenting other programs that we felt would feed the employees or help the employees navigate life. like I said before, the company was built as a Christian company. But I think prior to this mentality, we were sort of like, give us your hard day's work. We'll give you a paycheck, and we don't really need to know everything you have going on at home. Like, we just want you to come in and do your job, and we'll pay you. And, we're a good company, but we're not going to help you deal with all that stuff that you may have going on, in your personal life. There wasn't space or availability to sort of unpack the bags. And so I think through our transition, that became okay. And that, we gave space for that. We gave our management space to help the employees. It is such a fast-paced company that even that is a decision that you make, allowing people to have the time and the space to reach out to their brothers that they're working with or their sisters that they're working with.
That costs money. I mean,
yes, it does.
Quite simple.
But
that's money. That's going to the expense. All right, but let's pause here a second, because you're actually killing this. This is beautiful. All right, so you've tried these same services in the past. The actual method was ineffective. But
right.
when the purpose became here, how can we minister to? How can we love on these people? First of all, in small ways, we'll bring pastors in. Second, we're going to give them space to unpack some of this baggage that they're coming in with, and we start loving them and seeing them differently than just a number or a paycheck or an employee count. Start seeing them as people that we can minister to. Suddenly, a method you had tried in the past works beautifully. And for a good long period, turnover went down considerably, right?
Right. And it is still lower. It's been a little bit trickier with COVID and all of, and the refugees, that group of people has kind of slowed down in Colorado. So, and it's been so cool to watch them. Like, a lot of people, they'll start with, a lot of those refugees started with us, but now they've sort of like taken the next step up, and they've gone into careers that would maybe be more lifelong careers. And so, stepping stone for them. Some of them are, I think we still have like 45. So there is still quite a bit. But it's been fun to watch them sort of move on and grow and become citizens and, figure out their lives outside of the refugee camps and where they came from.
That's excellent. We could I could dig into this for another 30, 45 minutes, and I won't do that. But I want to leave it at this. You guys had tried a method. When you changed the approach toward the people, that's when that method started to work. And you were willing to put money through creating space for unpacking the bag, so to speak, allocate money for pastors to be there, which also takes up time. Sometimes we want to throw money at something by giving out, like we talked about, send money off to missions. What if we took some of that money and spent it in creating some space and giving our people some time to start seeing them a little differently and treat them the way you guys have? And it's not always a tit for tat thing where if we do this, we're paid back. But you guys saw a dramatic drop in turnover that in effect made it a financial win that you're pouring more time and effort into them, but the turnover dropping reduced expenses to the point where there was a win. So right. I just encourage anybody listening to start thinking in different ways around that, because you guys are great examples of that.
And we have, we hired a culture director. I'm sure you've met Adrienne along the way. So she was with us several years. She developed amazing programs when she was there. She, I think as a business owner and kind of the personality that James and I are, whenever there's a problem, we want to tackle it and run after it and help that person ourselves. But Adrienne was really good about creating a notebook and a program that would show people where to go when they needed something. So if they needed help with a mortgage, if they needed help with citizenship, if they needed help with a landlord that was treating them badly, she kind of created, if they needed dental health care, if health problems with kids at school, getting them enrolled, we made hers, that was basically her job. Her job was to help whatever problem somebody came to from within the company. That was her job, was to help them figure out how to navigate that or point them towards a resource that could help them navigate that. We also started to bring in programs like attendance parties, anniversary parties, birthday, once a month, celebrating all the birthdays for that month. And I will say that not all of the programs have been successful. Some of the programs that we started just didn't have any traction, or they weren't applicable to the people that we were trying to serve. And so some things were wins, some things weren't. We have probably a list of 100 different things that we've tried over the years. Adrienne left L&R Pallet to be home with her daughter. And then the other employee that was Chris was they were working together in that department. He left a few weeks ago. And so we're kind of at a bit of a standstill right now, and maybe a redirecting and praying about who God will now bring into that role.
And praying about it. Mm-hmm. That's good.
And we think we have him, but we'll see. He starts in a couple of weeks.
That's great. All right, so shift into, so you were in the business for a period. I think you stepped out for a little while with family, but you've come back in. Especially, I want to hear go back to the beginning of this year. COVID starts really getting everybody's attention. Then it became a real crisis. What was your response in the business, and what was your role, and how have you seen that play out since earlier this year?
Yeah, so like I told you before, when James and I were first married, I was basically running the office and all the admin side of it, built all of that up to keep up with all the growth that we had. We basically have 5 companies total. We have L&R Pallet, we have EnviroCycle, we started a 501c3, we have a small real estate that we started, and then we have an admin company. And so with all of those,
wow.
It's a lot of work. And so even when my oldest son was a freshman in high school, I told James, I'm tired. I'm tired. I was starting to have some health problems, I think, from just trying to do it all. And so I didn't really take time off. We finally hired somebody in the office to do the day-to-day work. And I was still kind of overseeing everything.
Gotcha.
But I did start, working at home became a thing then. And when my boy little, all 3 of my kids were little, that just wasn't what you did. I was kind of ahead of my time, I think. So they had to go with me. And by the time Dylan was a freshman, I knew my time with my kids was coming to a close. And so I was still working in the company, but not going to the office all the time. So a lot of my work was at home or in the back, in the scenes in the back. And
right.
So I don't remember what your question was. Where did we start with this?
Well, so let's touch on that for a minute. You're still working. You're still an impact in the business. You're just not physically present. And you've got, go ahead.
Okay, I remember your question now. So prior to COVID in October, we one of the gals, the first lady that we hired that sort of took over my job when Dylan was a freshman, she was there for 5 years and then decided that she wanted to retire and go out with her husband. And so then we hired another woman, and she was there for about 1.5 years. And that we knew we needed to make a change with that. And so she quit, and I'm not sure she gave a notice. And so that's when I had to jump all in. And It had been 6 years since I had worked in the company, and so much had changed. The basics were still there, but the functions and the processes of how they were to be completed were so much different. So once again, it was a learn as you go kind of thing. And that's how I've been the entire time I've worked there. So I have a degree in early childhood education, not anything to do with business. And everything I have done, I have had to self-teach or with the help of James's mom.
Well, that early childhood education helps you deal with grown men. So I get that.
Yeah. And it sort of feels like you are when you're dealing with that many employees, you feel like you're sort of running a school sometimes, and not to dismiss anybody or, talk down about it. It's just, it's a lot sometimes dealing with that many different lives.
No doubt. So take us into COVID as it comes in the first of the year. And what was your role in the response, and from your perspective, what were you thinking? You're going into this, you've already said, I've been in a crisis before with the embezzlement. I had strong faith and I was able to give James some strength in that. Tell us about COVID and how you guys responded to that, what you specifically did in your role.
So we had just started to get into a good rhythm with the woman that we currently have in that position. She came on right at Christmas last year. So her and I were still kind of transitioning, handing off. She was learning. I was, starting to find some free time again. And then COVID came. And so through COVID, we have several employees that are in their mid-60s that are on our office staff. We felt like they should not be in the office, so we sent them to work at home. But because they were working at home, again, that meant somebody had to be in the office. And how James and I approached COVID was we weren't gonna, we feel like L&R Pallet is a team, it's a family, and we are a part of that team. And we weren't gonna sit at home as the owners and force our employees to go out into that world, into the environment without us being there and being present with them. So we were all in and we were working. And again, my daughter was homeschooling by herself. I would make her breakfast in the morning, write a note on her paper plate. I love you. Have a good day. Good luck. And mama's out the door. And
how old is she?
She's 14 now. She was 13 when that all started. But they've been through it before. So they know, that they've got great independence. My kids are, they're all three amazing. And I really think it's from just being so present in the business their entire lives. So we approached COVID with just, it's funny, we have these women that we do prophetic praying with them every week. And they told us prior to COVID that we would be walking through a crowd of people and those people would be screaming and yelling at us, but that we were just supposed to keep walking forward and doing what we knew God called us to do. And once COVID hit, that was truly how we felt we navigated it. We are a manufacturing company. There's nothing that gets to the grocery store without being on a pallet. So if we don't go to work, you don't get your toilet paper, you don't get your paper towels, you don't get any of the produce, any of the meat, anything, all the things that this country was struggling to have was hitting the shelves because we went to work and our employees went to work.
Amen. So how did you approach them? What were some things you guys did with and for and through the employees as this crisis ramped up?
Well, we started off again, just speaking with them and meeting with them, praying over them, telling them that we didn't know how this was going to go, but all we could do was trust God and that he knew what was going to happen and he knew how we could get through it. A lot of the employees thought they were going to lose their jobs. They thought, a lot of companies were kind of downsizing, closing, not going to work. And we tried to promise as best we could that wasn't going to happen. We knew that our company had to keep going. We tried, the employees would do really, really well when they were with us during the week. And then they would go home on the weekends and watch the TV all weekend and come back. It's a hot mess again on Monday. And so I honestly have not watched the news since April, because I found myself in that same vicious cycle. And so we just kept meeting with them, being very present, trying to reassure them. We did an Easter service that was socially distanced. We have some great aerial footage that my son did of that, but that was something we normally would do. And James was adamant about not stopping the things that we normally did. And so we went ahead with our Easter service. What would that be, April? And then we actually started to have some COVID cases in our family and in the company. And that was tricky, but we navigated through that just fine too.
That's excellent.
The thing about COVID is it's so fear-inducing. There's so much that you can just get your eyes off of, God, and the fact that God takes care of you, he's taking care of you, through all the crises. Why not COVID as well? It doesn't need,
right.
Just because it has a scary name, pandemic, doesn't necessarily mean that it's beyond God's help. How did you navigate the fear side of things, just personally, just as a couple and through your own life?
Well, I have a funny story. Well, it's not a funny. Well, I have a story about that. So when this all started, we were one of the only. It was just sort of a very surreal time. Everybody was home, but we weren't. And so I would go to the grocery store. We would drive to work. There was no traffic on the roads. There was no one at the stores. And I remember at the beginning, I was walking through Target and it was empty. No one was there. And we kind of were on this little island because we didn't do COVID, the quarantine. We did things so much different than the rest of the country. And I was walking through Target and I remember thinking and praying, Lord, we need to get past this. And he said to me, it's the fear. And I said, I know it's the fear, but what do we do about that? And he said, you know what to do. And I know what to do. And I said, but how do we get the whole world to do that? And so that was like a little conversation that I had with God about, I know what to do about the fear. I know to shut the TV off. I know to put his word first. I know that what he says in this situation is no different than what he said about any other situation. COVID is no different than a situation that Jesus dealt with on this earth years ago. What we dealt with the embezzlement, what we dealt with, James had thyroid cancer years ago. It is no different. It is all the same. And it's sad to me that so many of us have made COVID bigger than any other situation and taken God out of the factor and that he can't handle it and he can't do it.
Yeah.
Tell me how you really feel.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize.
Good.
That's what we need to hear.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as
that's the battle that that's the battle I speak of. I just think so many times Christians, I think you have to step up, and it is a battle, and you have to put Satan in his place. And we have approached COVID in just that way. We've had people in our company that were in their mid 60s that had it, that did just fine. We've had people, our people are manufacturer employees. There's a good chance that they drink, they smoke, they're overweight, they don't eat the best foods. We all live that way. And so they've done just fine. And we have hit it with prayer. We anointed the warehouse with oil. We have done our church services. We have a pastor that comes in and prays with our management team every week. And he is absolutely amazing. I tell him sometimes I think he's an angel, that he's not even a real person, because the words that he speaks over us and to us are just so enlightening every week. And they are so on point.
Wow.
That's powerful. And I think that the way for a leadership to help employees, conquer fear is through living an example of fearlessness, and not just saying don't be afraid, but showing them, and that's so important. As we look at 2021, going to there, if you have, we have CEOs, business leaders of all sizes of businesses and all kind of different places around the world. What would you say to them leading into 2021, about planning their life and getting ready for this new year?
I don't know. That's tricky, because I feel like our experience through this whole thing has not been like anyone else's. And like I told you before, the prophetic word that was spoken over us, that we were going to be walking through the crowd and the crowd was going to be screaming at us, telling us what we should and shouldn't be doing, was truly how COVID started to play out for us. When we began to send our employees to work, when we were going to work, when my boys were going to work, we had friends, we had family, we had all sorts of emails from people telling us that we were doing the wrong thing, that we were putting our employees in jeopardy, that we weren't being mindful of them. And so our approach to this has been so different than everyone else's. We honestly have just kept living our life. And yes, not being able to go to restaurants, not being able to go on an airplane or go to Disneyland, all those things are forcing us to navigate things different. Yes, we've had to put up sanitation stations, the masks, we're trying to adhere to as much of that as we can, but we have taken this with such a strong faith-based approach that we just have to drown out everything that doesn't come in line with that. And I think that we're all going to have to start doing that. Just shut the world out and you do what God has called you to do.
That's great. That's awesome.
You said, I don't really know how to tell you to look at 21, but you just did, which is basically, to the listener, even if you did not do it the way you guys have done it in 2020, that doesn't mean you can't change your approach now going into 21
right.
And say, you know what? I am going to trust that the word says he will never leave me or forsake me. I'm going to trust what the Bible tells me, what God has shown me in past experiences and crises, and I'm going to have faith that if I stay head down, focused on Him, and get rid of the distractions, lo and behold, maybe, just maybe, He'll continue to be who He said He'd be.
No, not maybe. He will.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I put Bible verses everywhere. I will write them on note cards, index cards. I put them in my kids' glove boxes. I put them under their pillows and their backpacks. We put them all over the warehouse. Through COVID, when we would have an employee that would struggle with, that was home with dealing with it, I would write Bible verses out for them and give them to them. So filling yourself with that instead of all the other stuff is just so freeing. And it's just crazy, the vicious cycle that everybody's on right now, and the trust that they're putting in so many things that aren't Christ. And that this isn't people that are non-Christians. This is Christians. Right. Christians that are putting their trust in what the media says, in what the internet says, what the TV says. It's time to put your trust in Him, and He is above all of that.
Yeah.
Amen.
Absolutely. And this year it's been a revealer, I think, of prayer lives and just weaknesses that we have in our lives, because it's the hard times that really show, like, are you walking by faith, or are you on social media? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can't do both.
That's right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I've gotten rid a lot of my social media. I couldn't handle it. Like, I really couldn't.
Right.
But,
yeah.
This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. It's been amazing chatting with you. Before we close things out, just have a couple of quick fire questions for you. What's a time hack? You're a busy woman. You're doing a lot of things. What are some ways that you just kind of handle all the things that life throws at you?
I think because we have allowed the business to be, it's just so integrated into everything that we do. It's at work with us. I mean, we bring it home and we do it in the office. I feel like there's no like on off. If something needs to be done on the weekends, then it gets done on the weekends. And some people may think that's a wrong approach, but that's just how we do things. When there's something in front of us that needs to be done, we do it. And so I think my tenacity of doing things well and doing them right is what's gotten me, to where we are now. Taking my kids to work, I'm just not one that will go down easy. And so if there's something in front of us that needs to be done, it gets done. And so, we work from home, we work at work, we work when we travel, but God has blessed us so much, and we are able to do so much because of what He's given us that we need, neither of us feel bitter or resentment about that. It's just part of who we are and what we do.
That's awesome. What's a resource, like a book or something like that you'd recommend for people for inspiration?
I'm not a big podcast person. I don't watch a lot of things. I don't read a lot of books. I don't watch the news. I put myself on social media. I guess at the end of the day, my resource is God. And I believe His word above all word. And, people might have their experiences and their advice, and that may be really good for some people, but I think I just put what He has to say about situations. That's my resource.
Excellent.
That's powerful. Well, Carine, this has been an incredible chat. I really appreciate your time. It's been quite the inspiration.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. Last question. With all the things we've covered, considering those that are listening, what's the one absolute takeaway that you want to make sure anybody listening gets out of this conversation? What's the one big thing that, from your standpoint, is the most important, the most critical?
We did a podcast actually before COVID hit our company and our family. And we were so sure that with our faith and with all the prayer and all the covering that we had done, it just wasn't going to hit L&R Pallet. But the reality of that is very slim, right? It is going to come. It is probably going to affect everybody eventually. Everybody is probably going to have it or know somebody that has it. I actually had it last week. So I feel like right now there is so much transition in everybody's lives and so much just searching. And so what I would encourage people the most is just to take this time where maybe there aren't so many things on your plate and just seek Him. What does He have for your company? What does He have for you? What is His plan for your life in 2021 or even beyond 2021? and just spend this sort of quiet time with him and just surrender and allow him to lead you and guide you into what he has, next year and the next year and the next year.
It's excellent.
Powerful. That's awesome. Great thing to end on. Thank you so much, Carine. Really appreciate you.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Hope you found some value in today's discussion. If you're inspired and you'd like to learn more, His Way at Work has a number of resources and tools for you. Just check us out at hwaw.com. If you're new here and you'd like to check out more episodes, just go to Facebook or to any podcast platform and make sure to subscribe there. Or if you know somebody that might find value in what we're talking about, feel free to share with them and point them in our direction. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.